Looking for some new Core Set 2021 cards? Well, you can get them from our sponsor, Card Kingdom. Card Kingdom has Core Set 2021 up for pre-sale now, and you can check it out over at cardkingdom.com. Hello everyone, and welcome to a super special video. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and as you probably know, we've been talking a lot about Core Set 2021 over the last couple weeks with previews and all that stuff. Well, the full set is out. It is releasing shortly on Magic Arena, which means it is time to start talking about the impact of Core Set 2021 in various constructed formats. And today is Standard Day, top 10 standard cards from Core Set 2021, and joining me to break down these cards is Crim. How's it going today, Crim?
Hey, Seth. As you said, lots of Core 21 cards, so I'm really excited. This has definitely been my favorite core set since Origins.
Ooh, I agree. I think this core set absolutely nailed it with new cards and reprints. This core set just absolutely killed it. And we have a really solid top 10 list, I think, to talk about today. But before we jump into the cards, a couple things to let everyone know about. One is the top 10 list we're making the video of is actually me and Crim's individual top 10 lists kind of mashed together. We had a lot of agreement, especially on the top half of the list, and then the bottom half is a little bit more scattered. But if you want to see our own lists, you can see them in the article. I will link it in the description. We have each of our individual top 10s there as well. Also, as far as the rules of our top 10 list, core sets are a little weird with the reprints. So what we decided with reprints for the top 10 list is if the card was new to a format, it would count. So for example, in a standard, Azusa is fair game for our standard top 10 list because it's a new card to the format and it deserves discussing. On the other hand, if we were doing modern, then Azusa wouldn't be included in our top 10 list because you already know what it does there. But anyway, with that stuff out of the way, are you ready, Crip, to talk about the top 10 Core Set 2021 cards for Standard?
Most definitely.
All right, so let's jump right into it. Coming in at number 10 on our list, we have a Garrix card. Not Garrix itself, but Garrix Harbinger, a 3-mana 4/3 that can generate card advantage and has hexproof from black, which could be pretty relevant depending on how the removal shakes out. Where do you see this 3-drop landing in Standard, Grim?
I think this card, well, with the recent popularity of mono green Stompy, I think this card is great. It gives Stompy a way to kind of generate its card advantage, as you had mentioned. And I think the biggest thing from this is that it can deal damage to a player or planeswalker. So if it can hit a planeswalker, meaning that you get to also go dig for another creature, or Garrix planeswalker if you choose to play it. And hexproof from black I think is going to be very relevant because cards like Eliminate I think will probably be popular. And a lot more hard removal, either Oath of Kaya and whatnot, stuff like that. Of course, this doesn't dodge the the Elspeth Conquers Death test or the Teferi test, but regardless, I still think it's good enough because the Stompy deck has enough threats to where those cards will be taxed. And they'll be stretched thin. So if this gets to connect even once, you've already gotten a silly amount of value.
Yeah, I mean, even a single hit where it replaces itself already makes this a really good card. A 4/3 for 3 is already a really good rate. That's already just a good creature on its own. And I think the hexproof, if you look at the most played cards in Standard right now, kind of leading up into Core Set 2021, black removal not super heavily played. I'm kind of surprised that we don't see more Heartless Axe and Murderous Riders. But if you look at the power of the removal in the format, those cards and Eliminate and Grasp of Darkness, I would not be at all surprised if, especially once Teferi's gone and playing at instant speed has a little bit more value when playing instant speed removal spells do something, if those cards really take off in Standard. So even if hexproof from black isn't game changing immediately, I think it will be eventually. Also makes it a pretty interesting mutate target. If you're mutating stuff, any little bit of protection you can get from removal is a bonus, and you get to keep all the text on it too. So that's kind of another interesting synergy potentially.
And that's why I think I absolutely love this card, because of that, the mutate ability on top of it. And I think with the new set coming out, and maybe this doesn't take off immediately, but I don't see why it wouldn't. It just seems like this is just better than Yorvo, right? In my opinion, that doesn't pass the Teferi test. That doesn't pass all these both don't pass the same tests, right? Except this has one additional layer. It can't get Oath of Kaya if Esper picks up again, or any of the Orzhov decks or anything like that. But this just seems like something I'd like more than a Yorvo, because Yorvo just seems vanilla. Because either 4/4, 10/10, it's gonna die all the same or get bounced all the same. And on top of that, this card just does way more. And it's not legendary.
Also say, It is not legendary, which is another bonus. I should also say that in my top 10 list, I probably should have mentioned this in the intro, I didn't focus super hard on the current meta, honestly, because this is the last set before rotation, so we know things are definitely going to change at rotation. Plus, we're in this brave new world where we get bannings really frequently, so I felt it was a little silly to be like, oh, like, it's probably not good against Wilderness Reclamation, because by the time we post this video, who knows, like, maybe Wilderness Reclamation is not even part of the format anymore with how bannings go these days. So I I considered the decks that the cards could fit in. For me, like, being bad against Wilderness Rec wasn't really a deal breaker, or something that was, like, a huge consideration when I was making my list. Did you think about that at all, or was it kind of just like cards that you thought were good in a vacuum?
These are just like cards that I think will be good because of decks that exist now and like can slot in. I did factor that into it. Like example, like Mono Green Stompy is popular. But also I think this card is just pretty sweet overall because like once rotation happens and if everybody shifts to black removal, this card will be huge.
Well, speaking of black cards, not a removal spell, but number 9 on our list, we have a card that I know you're not as high on, Crim, but I am really high on. Demonic Embrace. Just this 3 mana aura that to me, it reminds me a little bit of a cross between, like Rancor a little bit with its ability to keep being cast from the graveyard. A little bit like Angelic Destiny, which a little bit more expensive, also gave lifelink, but another recursive aura. And both of those cards were very good whenever they were in Standard. I feel like +3/+1 plus evasion is a pretty scary clock. And the reason I'm pretty high on it is twofold. One is I think there could be a sweet black aggro style deck, like slamming this on a Rotting Regisaur, for example. And we still got like Knight of Ebon Legion. We have some good black aggro pieces, but just slamming this on a Regisaur, that's like 10 damage in the air. That's a super fast clock. The other reason I'm hyped for it is we've seen like black-white auras be floating around on the fringes of Standard, various times being like decently playable, other times like tier 3, but kind of like the Hateful Eidolon, Elcid of Life's Bounty, All That Glitters, Euphemia style decks. And this seems like a really easy inclusion for a deck like that maybe gets better with some of the new pieces coming into the format. But Grib, any thoughts on this one, even though I know this was one this was more of a my selection than your selection?
Initially when I saw this, I thought like it's a little too expensive. That's my issue with it. Like, so like the 3 mana part, but of course if you are able to like, you know what I mean? Like this is still 3 mana, and like those Orzhov Aura decks, like the ones with the Hateful Eidolon, I often see them sitting around 2 mana or 3 mana, and if they're spending their whole turn to like enchant their creature, that means they're not holding up Karametra's Blessing. So I'm kind of all for them playing this card because, you know what I mean? Like, it's all the same to me. I don't have to worry about this. I mean, like, it is cool that I can discard this to, like, Rotting Regisaur, like you had mentioned, and then just, like, enchanting it, but this just seems a little too pricey for me to pay, to play. Like, Rancor, at least, you know, was 1 mana. So yeah. I did like that. And it immediately sent itself back to my hand.
I think the other downside is, with the White-Black Aura deck that I didn't actually mention, is it does mean you can't play Lurrus in a lot of those decks, even with the nerfing. Like, Lurrus is still good enough in a deck like that. So I guess that's another vote against Demonic Embrace, is it would, part of the opportunity cost is you would give up playing Lurrus as a companion. How much that matters post-nerfing? Less than it did before, but it still is something to keep in mind that you would give up Lurrus to play this as well.
Correct. Yeah, like you can no longer play Lurrus, and a lot of the, like the value, even with the nerf, that Aura's deck is looking to get is to reoccur its like Hateful Eidolons over and over or something like that. So you're going to lose out on that because you're playing Demonic Embrace.
Let's move on to number 8 on our list. And I already kind of stamped my mark on this one on Twitter saying I thought that Azusa was one of the most overrated cards. Actually, the most overrated card, I said, for Standard from Core Set 2021. But Crim, you have a different opinion. I want to hear why you like Azusa for Standard and what you think it can do in the format.
So, I like right now it's like a buffet for ramp players, right? You have a ridiculous amount of options between Growth Spiral, Uro, this, Cultivate, and whatnot, but like, I just can't imagine a world where Azusa isn't good when you get to play 2 additional lands each turn. It's not like your opponent can respond to you playing the first, you just get to play it, you hold priority, right? So you can still play that, and like with cards like Rada, you can go ahead and play off the top of your deck now, and like whatnot, and so I just think that with how many lands decks are playing now, and like, you know, certain end game threats, playing 2 lands, even once, just like, let's say you play this and it gets shocked or stomped. I think you've already gotten an insane amount of value. You played 2 lands and you burnt a stomp or something out of their hands. So I think this card is perfect. And on top of that, it curves very well. Like, cause like if you go Boreal Grazer, you're looking for a 3-drop. This is your other 3-drop, right? You can go Grazer into this, and then you'll already have 5 mana on like,
Nissa's amount of mana, perhaps.
Yeah, like
Nissa,
you have Nissa mana. You know, a certain card I despise. You have Nissa mana already. Like, think about how crazy that is. I don't know. I just don't see a world where like Azusa isn't at least like played in Standard somewhat. Just because there's a lot, like really good payoffs for ramp right now.
Yeah, and I think that's a good argument. I think on my end, I like Azusa as a synergy piece. I like how it interacts with Rada or throw like Experimental Frenzy or, I don't know, Bolos' Citadel into a list. So I do like it as a synergy piece. I think my concern and why I kind of feel it's overrated is more based on just the amount of ramp that we have right now with Uros and Growth Spirals and Cultivates, and the list of really good ramp spells is long. So I think my concern is, as just a generic ramp spell, I'm not sure there's room in ramp decks for Azusa because we just have so much insane ramp. So I think that is more my concern. But again, that's something that could change after rotation. Some of those pieces are going to be leaving, and I do like the synergy. So I don't want to make it sound like Azusa is like a horrible card, but I think there's just better ramp spells for a lot of decks in the format.
I mean, like, I know this might be weird, but I feel like I like this a little bit more than Cultivate.
Okay.
I don't like this
more
than Uro, and I definitely don't like this more than Growth Spiral, right? But I do think that there's room for Azusa in those decks.
I think especially if you're a high land count deck, if you're playing one of those like 28 land decks or something, then Azusa does get more appealing. And as you mentioned, we've seen a shift in deck building recently towards decks playing more and more lands, which is a vote of confidence, I would say, for Azusa. If you're already playing a ton of lands, it's much more likely that you're going to have 2 lands to play on the turn that you play Azusa.
Correct. Like what? They're going up to like 28 to like 30 lands now. So, and if you're a Yorion deck, like that, like a Yorion Bant mid-range deck, you're going up to like what, 39 lands. So there's more than enough things to do with Azusa, I think, when it comes to lands.
Well, let's move on to number 7 on our list. We have Spark Hunter Masticore, our new Planeswalker sniper. And what do you think about this one, Crim?
I think it lives up to its name. I mean, as an additional cost to cast the spell, discard a card, I don't know if that's really that crazy of a cost, right? It's not like I'm not like already trying to throw cards into my graveyard as is. The fact that this can, like, it's colorless means that, and it's not legendary, means you can play multiple. And on top of that, it doesn't get like, it doesn't get bounced by 3 fairies, so this definitely passes the Teferi test. You can give it indestructible. You grant it at 3 mana. You can also ping a Planeswalker for 1 mana, so like, it's not like your opponent can now just like play a Planeswalker and just like, you know, just minus. Like, I can't go like Teferi, bounce it, and then hope you don't like kill my Teferi. You can in response just ping my Teferi. So this will kill Planeswalkers, and you know, when we've got a lot of 3 mana Planeswalkers that need to be dealt with, I'm kind of liking this. New Teferi, like all those things. Like this card, it even survives new Ugin. Like the Ugin, like
that is true. It is the ultimate foil to Ugins, which, right? Yeah, I mean, we're in a very Planeswalker heavy standard. We still have War of the Spark for a few more months. We have Teferis and Nissas. We have a lot of really good Planeswalkers. We have more good Planeswalkers coming with Core Set 2021 itself, and this feels like a really good answer because it's not narrow. Like something like the Elder Spell, obviously it's an insane answer to Planeswalkers, but it's not the kind of card that you can just play in your main deck because if you run into Mono Red or something, it's just a dead draw and you lose because of it, or other matchups where there's not a lot of Planeswalkers. Spark Hunter Masticore sounds that problem. You have this threat that is on curve on its own. It blocks all day against Mono Red. It's fine. It's actually pretty good against Mono Red or decks like that. Yeah. While also being a great answer to the Teferis and Nissas of the world. So I'm pretty high in this card as well. I don't think that discarding a card is a huge downside. And if you're discarding like a Kroxa or an Uro, maybe it's even an upside sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Like there's tons of targets that you're willing to throw away from your hand. And even if like there's other cards there, like I think I'm okay with that if this has protection from Planeswalkers, because it would feel terrible if like this got bounced by Teferi, right after you discarded a card, but no, that's not the case, right? And on top of that, it's not the worst in the late game when you know, like, hey, I need to get, like, I have a bunch of mana, I can now sink a ton of that mana and blow up planeswalkers and or give it indestructible. Like, this does something that almost, like, it can protect itself almost.
I think the only drawback I would say is Brazen Borrower does line up pretty well with it, and Elspeth Conqueror's Death is a way to answer it through indestructible, so there is drawbacks, but even with that in mind, there's so many planeswalkers running around that I think that Spark Hunter Massacre definitely has a place in the format.
I think the biggest takeaway from this, though, is that it is, once again, colorless. So it is 3 mana in any deck you can play this. Like, right? That matters a lot here because, let's say, Stompy or even Mono Red, like stuff like that, your opponent's going to already be using their removal often, and like their Brazen Borrowers try to stay alive. So this is just another threat they now have to factor into their game plan. Can they survive if you stick a Masticore?
Yeah, no, that is a very good point, and colorlessness is a huge upside to this card. Well, let's move on. Number 6 on our list, we have another 3-drop, this one in the Gruul colors, Errata Heart of Keld, maybe the most aggressive Courser of Kruphix that we've seen with First Strike and this pumping ability. What do you want to do with this one, Crim?
I mean, I want to play Azusa in this, but like this card is great, right? I mean, Courser, though it was like sweet against aggro, it wasn't necessarily the greatest clock, right? Against like control decks and whatnot. But the difference here is that this it can pump itself. So late game, you can spend all that mana that you have. Rada gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of lands you control. Yeah, I think I like how that sounds, especially with Azusa and all the ramp that you have in green. So this can just pump itself and close out a game. It's also got First Strike on your turn, so that's nice. And playing off the top of your deck, not the worst.
Yeah, I really like this card. I like the synergies you were talking about with Azusa, playing multiple lands off the top of your deck. Obviously awesome, or we talked a little bit about experimental frenzies and kind of the ways you can go deep with that plan. But I also think it could be just a fine, like, Gruul card. Compared to, like, Gruul Spellbreaker or something. You don't get the haste, but in a deck like Gruul, being able to get extra lands off the top of your deck and find more action, one of the ways that things can go wrong in a deck like Gruul is you, like, get your board swept or something, and you just draw a couple too many lands, and you don't have that last threat or two. Being able to get extra lands off the top of your deck is a nice upside in a deck like that. And then the pump ability is super scary and just, like, absolutely frightening if you happen to have, like, an Embercleave or something like that. That just, like, pretty much is a one-shot kill in the late game. So I think that it has potential in, like, ramp-style decks and also just, like, Gruul aggro-style decks.
Yeah, I could see, like even, like, Temur Reclamation boarding this in, right? Like, post-board as a way to close out the game. Or any of the, like, any ramp decks like you had mentioned, yeah.
Well, let's move on to number 5 on our list. We have the Ooze, Scavenging Ooze is back at Standard, and I will say that I think we might even be underrating this card. I actually forgot about Scavenging Ooze at first when I originally made my list, then I remembered it and added it, but I didn't add it really high, and then we were talking before recording, and just naming off the list of things this is good against, Uros, and Cauldron Familiars, and things being reanimated by Elspeth Conqueror's Death, and gaining life against aggro, and Artie being an on-curve creature that grows throughout the game. This card is really good, right, Crim? Like, this is going to be a main deckable, very powerful card in Standard, I would think.
I think like my list initially had this somewhere like around 7 or 8 or something like that, and I think I'm definitely underrating it. It should be higher because like it eats everything. It eats all the gods, or I mean the Titans, like you had mentioned. If Demonic Embrace ever runs wild on people, then this can keep that in check too. And yeah, like you had also said, it consumes, like it gains life against aggro, right? And eventually, if they do not kill this, it grows to a point where it's unkillable for like a burn deck, right? So this card just does everything you want it to out of a green creature, and at a very good price for 2 mana. Like, this card is insane. I think this definitely should go up higher, actually, now that we talk about it again.
And it's kind of cute with, like, Gem Razors and stuff, because you get to keep the +1/+1 counters, so it's a way you can, like, boost your mutate stuff, so maybe the mono green deck people have been playing.
This has been, like, also the graveyard hate that, like, the green stompy decks and just the mutate decks and all the creature-based decks that have been missing, right? Like, I mean, Soul Guide Lantern was okay, but, like, this actually gives a clock and eats the graveyard, so I think this card is very good.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is exactly the kind of graveyard hit you want to fight against cards like Uro and Cauldron Familiars, because it's fine anyway. It's fine in other matchups, just being a relatively on-curve creature anyway. So the Graveyard Exile is just like a bonus that you get to blow out those Uros and Cauldron Familiars, which are pretty relevant in our current standard format.
Definitely.
Well, let's move on. Number 4 on our list. We have Basri's Lieutenant, and this is one of those 4-drops that it's just got a lot of text on it and does a lot of different things, and I think it's got a pretty good rate just on its own, being essentially a 4/5 for 4 mana in white. But Crim, what do you think about our new Human Knight?
I definitely agree with that. This card is insane. It's your 4 mana, 4/5 at the very worst that has protection from multicolored, which we've already seen be relevant in like other cards like Stonecoil Serpent. And the fact that even if they sweep the board here, this still leaves something behind. You know what I mean? Like, or like if it, like the last line of text there, when Basri's Lieutenant or another creature you control dies, if it had a 1/1 counter on it, create a 2/2 knight. Like that's insane, right? Like it leaves something behind. It's an insane rate. It's got great like keywords here with protection from multicolored. So I'm on board with this. Just all around solid creature.
Yeah, it's just a solid creature all around. We often talk about like creatures needing to do something right away in Standard, which is how Standard has played out recently. Basri's Lieutenant, I mean, I guess it kind of puts a counter on something, but really it does the opposite, where it does something when it leaves play, and that is almost as good. Your opponent kills it, you still get something out of the deal. So even if your opponent immediately has a removal spell, you're still going to get some value out of Basri's Lieutenant. And we didn't even really consider the fact that it's a knight, and we've seen knights kind of be close to playable in Standard as it is. They're mostly from Throne of Eldraine, so they're not actually rotating, so maybe they get a little boost at rotation. So maybe the tribal synergies, or we just got a bunch of +1/+1 counter synergies with like Conclave Mentor, Basri itself. So maybe those additional synergies could give this just a little more boost of power. But even without those synergies, I think it's just a good card on rate.
Yeah. And it passes the Teferi test, right? So like the main reason why we want stuff to do stuff immediately or have an ETB effect is because with so many Teferis around, getting bounced, you know what I mean? That doesn't feel great, but like this doesn't. So just what I want.
Well, speaking of bouncing, number 3 on our list, we have a bouncer in Baron Tolarian Archmage. And Baron's super sweet. Just kind of like a mana war, except it can also hit planeswalkers. And it can even draw you some cards if you bounce a permanent back to your hand during the turn. So, Crim, what do you think about Baron in Standard?
I think that, like, luckily this is legendary, or else this could be a problem. But, this being able to bounce a planeswalker is the biggest thing to me. I think that is huge. You can bounce your own planeswalker or your own thing, and if you did return something to your own hand, then you get to draw a card, so it rewards you for that. But on top of that, if you need to, like maybe just get a planeswalker to reset it so it doesn't ultimate or something along those lines, it can hit that too. And with Thassa Deep Dwelling still in the format, you can blink, do this twice. Like I don't know, I really like this card. 3 mana bounces like Reflector Mage, Mana War you had mentioned. These are cards that I've come to really enjoy. So it's nothing too flashy, but it's just a good card. It's a very good card.
Yeah, I think we've seen recently with like Reflector Mage and then Teferi that 3 mana things that bounce something and have an additional upside, like potentially like drawing an extra card or hitting planeswalkers in this case. Those cards have seen a lot of play recently, and Baron has some really cool shenanigans with your own cards, especially with like War of the Spark planeswalkers that some of them can't add loyalty to themselves. Yep. Your Narset goes down to 1 and is just like stuck there. Baron resets it, and then you get to draw a card from bouncing it and get 2 more down ticks with Narset theoretically. Or you can just kind of like loop it with your own Teferis, like tick down to bounce Baron and draw a card, then Baron to pick up Teferi to replay it with more loyalty, draw another card with Baron. So there's some really sweet value loops available, and that doesn't even include just like bouncing your opponent's thing as a tempo play. So I think the fact that it's a good tempo play against your opponent and has some card advantage synergies to take advantage of your own cards makes Baron a pretty potent card.
Correct. Like when you had Reflector Mage and you couldn't do anything with it, it was just a 2/3 for 3, right? But at least this, like against a control deck, you're like, okay, well if you're not gonna do anything, then I'm just gonna return my Planeswalker, like you said. So huge card advantage stuff here.
Moving on to number 2 on our list, and I don't even know if I'm gonna talk about this one. Crim, you've been counting down the days since we heard that core set 2021 was going to be a Teferi set. We found our Teferi Master of Time. Why don't you tell the people what you think about this card?
This card is sweet, and since it's mono blue, you can play it in Grixis. You can do so many things with this. But like the biggest thing here is I really like the passive of this card. Because it's definitely something that like a Teferi card would do, right? Because you've seen the 6 mana Teferi, where you had ultimate and then you could activate Planeswalker's abilities at instant speed. But now this just has it built into itself. So being able to loot on your turn and then loot on your opponent's turn, or do some combination of loot and then phase something out on your opponent's turn, I think that's pretty big here. And that -10 will, like, though it only has 3 loyalty, it gets 2 essentially every cycle, right? So it kind of has it can get up there pretty quick. So it's nothing crazy, like, you know, it's not like, you know, like 5 fairy or 3 fairy, but I think that just all in all, being able to loot and activate multiple times is huge.
Yeah, I agree. I think this card is really good. I was very frightened when I heard we were getting a Teferi set that we were going to have another unfun Teferi. But to me, Teferi, I think it's a very powerful card, but it also seems like a relatively fun card. Like, you're looting, you got some removal, but it's not, you know, not letting people cast spells or tucking itself into the library so you can win without any win conditions. So I feel like it's a really good card, and being mono blue, definitely a nice bonus and opens up a lot of additional avenues. Plus we have things that care about the graveyard, like discarding fills your graveyard to get back your Uros with escape and things like that. So there's some extra synergies there, and being able to do it twice a turn is a lot of advantage. It's going to be really difficult, even though it doesn't technically generate card advantage, but it's going to be really difficult to flood out, not find the right cards when you can loot twice each turn cycle with Teferi.
Yeah, especially in like a format like right now, you definitely don't want to flood out, and you definitely want to always be digging for answers or a high power card, and this card can do it multiple times. So very, very, very nice card. Just all around a solid blue Planeswalker.
Moving on. Number 1 on our list, we got another Planeswalker, another reprint, Ugin the Spirit Dragon. So if you've been playing Standard for a while, you'll remember that, I guess it wasn't that long ago, or maybe it actually was that long ago at this point, but Fate Reforged, Ugin was in Standard, and last time Ugin was in Standard, it was okay. There were decks that played it, but it didn't dominate the format or anything. However, Crim, I think things might be a little different in 2020 and the current Standard format Ugin is entering. Why are we more hyped about Ugin's potential now than we were for it back in Fate Reforged?
Hyped, concerned, you know, whatever. But like, cause like in Fate Reforged, you were paying 8 mana, right? And you were playing these lands on curve, but 2020 Magic, this is probably the best payoff, right? You can now, with all the ramp things that we've got, Azusa, Growth Spiral, Cultivate, Nissa, I can't tell you how many times we're gonna probably see Nissa into Ugin. This card does everything you want to do. It can +2, deal 3 damage to any target, so it can actually close out the game by just pinning your opponent down, pick off threats, and of course, most importantly, that -X. Exiles each permanent with converted mana cost X or less, that's 1 or more colors. That's insane, right? Like that you can ramp and then completely sweep the board, and the exile is insanely relevant. Obviously, if you ultimate, sure, you're gonna probably win.
Yeah, this card is, I mean, Ugin is super powerful. We know it's super powerful. It sees play in Modern. It's playing Standard in the past. But the fact that it's just so common in Standard these days, against certain decks, to have an opponent that has 8 mana on the battlefield turn 5-ish,
yeah,
or somewhere in that range.
This is a 5-drop.
Yeah, that is incredibly frightening, and Ugin is one of the, I don't know what I would rather ramp into, in all honesty, and it even interacts well with Nissa, as you mentioned, because lands are technically colorless, even if they're animated into creatures, so you're not going to wrath away your own lands. So yeah, I think Ugin is going to be all over the place, and if anything, I think it definitely deserves the top slot on our list. If anything, I'm a little worried that with the current amount of ramp we have, and how easily decks get to 8 mana, I'm a little worried that Ugin might actually be too good. I'm kind of scared of how good this will be in Standard.
Yep, and I'm right there with you. Because, like, this is just a card that is gonna, like, you know, it's a closer, but it was costed at 8 mana for a reason, but if you see it any earlier than that, then you're gonna get really, really worried.
Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our top 10 core set 2021 cards for Standard. So Crim, thanks for hanging out and doing it. It's always fun to talk new cards.
Yes, thanks for having me.
And thanks everyone for listening. So you've seen our list. You can check out our full individual list over on the website. I'll link it in the description, but let us know what you think. What cards are you hyped for Standard from core set 2021? What did we get right? What did we get wrong? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.